morning everyone. Today we will discuss The Tempest, Act 2, Scene 1, lines 21 till 100. So by the end of this video, you will be able to learn the explanation of lines 21 till 100 and learn the references and literary devices used in the lines 21 till 100. In a previous video, we have read how Gonzalo requests Alonso to cheer up. He keeps trying to cheer up Alonso by talking nonsense, and Antonio and Sebastian make fun of Gonzalo. Let us quickly read lines 21 till 35. Sebastian, you have taken it wiselier than I meant you should. Gonzalo to Alonso, therefore, my lord. Antonio to Sebastian, fie! What a spendthrift is he of his tongue. Fie, what is the meaning of fie, children? Fie means shame. What is the meaning of spendthrift? It means reckless. Alonso to Gonzalo, I pray thee, spare. What is the meaning of pray thee? It means request you. And spare me from your advice. Whose advice? Gonzalo's advice. Gonzalo, well, I have done, but yet. Yet means still. So children, Sebastian says that Gonzalo has taken his meaning of dollar more wisely than he thought Gonzalo would. Gonzalo continues and says to Alonso, therefore, my lord. But before he could finish, Antonio says that it's a shame that Gonzalo keeps on talking still. Alonso then requests Gonzalo to let him be alone and spare him from his advice. Gonzalo says that he has finished, but still. Again, his line remains incomplete. So now while he is speaking this line, Sebastian speaks to Antonio. Sebastian to Antonio, he will be talking. He, Gonzalo. Antonio, which of he or Adrian, for a good wager, first begins to crow? Sebastian, the old cock. Antonio, the cockerel. Now let us discuss the meanings, children. A good wager means stake or bet. Crow means speak. The old cock refers to Gonzalo. It's a disrespectful way of saying an old fellow. And cockerel, young cock. Here it refers to Adrian. So Sebastian says to Antonio that Gonzalo must go on talking. Antonio then asks Sebastian if he would make a wager as to which of the two, Gonzalo or Adrian, first start to speak. Antonio means that they are both great talkers, and so it will be an interesting point to wager who shall be the first to break the silence. Sebastian says that he shall bet on the old cock, that is Gonzalo, and Antonio replies that he shall bet on the young cock, that is Adrian. Sebastian, done. The wager. Antonio, a laughter. Sebastian, a match. Adrian, though this island seemed to be desert. Antonio to Sebastian, ha ha ha. Let us discuss the meanings, children. Wager means amount for bet. A match means I agree. Desert, it means lonely. So Sebastian says to Antonio that the bet is settled. He asks him what is the amount for the bet. Antonio replies that the wager is a good laugh. Sebastian says that he agrees. It is Adrian who starts first. That though this island seems to be completely barren, and before he could complete, Antonio laughs. It is because Antonio has won the bet, as Adrian was the first to speak. Let us discuss the gist of the lines. Sebastian says to Gonzalo that he is taking it more seriously than Sebastian himself meant it. Gonzalo further says to Alonso that therefore, but before he could complete his line, Antonio asks Sebastian if this man ever shuts up. Alonso then requests Gonzalo to speak no more. Gonzalo replies that he is nearly finished, but he wants to say just one last thing. Sebastian then says to Antonio that Gonzalo insists on talking. Antonio offers Sebastian to have a bet on who will start speaking first, Adrian or Gonzalo. Sebastian then insults Gonzalo by calling him an old cock. He says that the old cock will speak. Antonio says that he will pick the younger cock, that is, Adrian. Sebastian then asks Antonio what is the bet and what's the prize. Antonio replies that the prize is a good laugh. Sebastian says that it's a deal. It is Adrian who starts speaking first. He says that though this island may appear to be lonely, Antonio wins the bet, therefore he laughs out loud. Let us now read the lines from 36 till 55. Sebastian, so you are paid. Adrian, uninhabitable and almost inaccessible. Sebastian, yet. Adrian, yet. Antonio, he could not miss it. Adrian, it must needs be of subtle, tender and delicate temperance. Let us discuss the meanings, children. Uninhabitable means without inhabitants. Inaccessible, out of reach of mankind. It refers to the island. Here on the word temperance there is a pun. So Sebastian says that the bet has been paid. Adrian continues and says that though the island seems to be deserted, without inhabitants and out of humanity's reach and almost inaccessible, now before he could complete his line, Sebastian says yet. And Adrian too says yet. As he started the sentence with though, so he had to answer it with yet. Antonio says that he could not fail to repeat this word yet. Antonio then interferes that Adrian is such a talker that he could not miss repeating the word he had heard spoken. Adrian continues his line and says that though the island seems to be deserted, without inhabitants and out of humanity's reach and almost inaccessible, it must have an undefinite, mild and delicate temperance. So children, he uses the word temperance for temperature. Antonio, temperance was a delicate wench. Sebastian, aye, and as subtle as he most learnedly delivered. Adrian, the air breathes upon us here most sweetly. Sebastian, as if it had lungs and rotten ones. Let us discuss the meanings, children. Wench means girl. Subtle, clever. He refers to Adrian. Breathes, blows. Most sweetly, sweetly perfumed. Now, as I already told you, there is a pun on the word temperance. And it is also personification because temperance is the name of a girl. So, Adrian uses the word temperance by mistake for temperature. This gives Antonio the chance to take up his mistake in the following line by making a pun upon the word temperance. He says that Temperance, that is the name of a girl, was a fine girl. Sebastian agrees and says, yes, and clever, as he has most learnedly put it. Adrian continues to speak and says that the air here on the island is sweetly perfumed. Sebastian replies that or it seems as if it came from bad lungs, for he does not feel that it is a perfumed one. Antonio, or as it were perfumed by a fen. Gonzalo, here is everything advantageous to life. Antonio, true, safe means to live. Sebastian, of that there's none or little. Let us discuss the meaning, children. By a fen means a marshy place. Safe means except. Now this line, or as it were perfumed by fen, has a sarcasm in it. So Antonio very sarcastically says that it seems to be something of a swamp or a fen or a marshy place. Now perfumed means pervaded with sweet odors, but the odors from a fen or marsh are usually very bad. Gonzalo says that here on the island they get everything necessary for life. Antonio replies that it's true that they get everything necessary for life except the means of living. Sebastian agrees and says there is none or very little mean of living here. Gonzalo, how lush and lusty and luxuriant the grass looks. How green. Antonio, the ground indeed is tawny. Sebastian, with an eye of green in it. Antonio, he misses not much. Sebastian, no, he doth but mistake the truth totally. So children, what is the meaning of lush? It means luxuriant. Lusty, it means vigorous. Tawny, it means yellowish brown or sunburnt. Eye, tint or color. So Gonzalo praises the grass and says that the grass is very luxuriant, strong and green. Antonio disagrees and says that indeed the ground is yellow colored. Sebastian says that it has a touch of green in it. Antonio ironically replies that Gonzalo is not wrong. Sebastian disagrees and says that Gonzalo is farthest from the truth. Let us read the gist of the lines. Sebastian says that Antonio has won. Adrian continues his sentence and says that though the island seems to be deserted, uninhabitable and almost inaccessible, as it were, Sebastian again speaks in between and says that now Adrian is going to say yet. Adrian continues and says yet. Antonio says that Adrian had to say it as it was unavoidable. Why was it unavoidable? For he had started the sentence with though. Adrian again continues his sentence and says that though the island is deserted, uninhabitable and almost inaccessible, it must be mild and have a temperate climate. Antonio uses a pun and says that he knew Temperance. She was a fine girl. Sebastian agrees with him and says that she was mild too. Adrian says that there's always a breath of fresh air here on the island. Sebastian says that it seems as if the island breathes from rotten lungs, maybe. Antonio sarcastically says that it's stinking like a swamp. Gonzalo says that the island contains everything beneficial to life. Antonio says that it is true. The island has everything except something to live on. Sebastian says that there's little or nothing of that. Gonzalo says the grass looks lush and healthy. Antonio says that the ground is brown or tawny. Sebastian says that it has a touch of green in it. Antonio ironically says that Gonzalo doesn't miss a thing. Sebastian disagrees and says that Gonzalo just gets reality completely wrong. Let us now discuss lines 56 till 75. Gonzalo, but the rarity of it is, which is indeed almost beyond credit. Sebastian, as many vouched rarities are. So let us discuss the meanings, children. Rarity is exception. Beyond credit means incredible. Vouched means guaranteed. Now children, there is an allusion used here. So an allusion to the amazing tales of rare things seen abroad, brought home by the travelers from foreign lands. Many were thought to invent stories for credulous public. So Gonzalo says that but what seems exceptional and it is almost incredible. Sebastian says that as are many rare things which people swear to have seen. So it is an allusion to amazing stories of the rare things which were seen abroad or brought home by the travelers. So many were thought to invent stories for gathering public. Gonzalo, that our garments being, as they were drenched in the sea, hold, notwithstanding their freshness and glosses, being rather new dyed than stained with salt water. Let us discuss the meanings. Garments, clothes. Drenched, wet. Hold, sustain. Notwithstanding, nevertheless. Freshness, fresh appearance. Glosses, shine. Antonio, if but one of his pockets could speak, would it not say he lies? Now Gonzalo proves his point by giving an example. He says that, for example, their clothes, having been soaked in the sea water, yet retain their freshness and shine, seeming rather as if recently dyed than saturated with salt water. Now children, if you remember, Ariel had also told Prospero in Act 1, Scene 3 that the clothes look more fresh. Antonio disagrees to this and asks if one of his pocket could only speak, would it not tell or prove that Gonzalo was telling a lie? Antonio means to say that his pockets not only did not hold or retain freshness, but hold mud which must have got into them. Sebastian, or very falsely, pocket up his report. Now children, this pocket up his report is the idea of concealing the truth, just as we say to pocket an insult. Gonzalo, methinks our garments are now as fresh as when we put them on, first in Africa at the marriage of the king's fair daughter Claribel to the king of Tunis. Sebastian, it was a sweet marriage, and we prosper well in our return. Now children, here irony has been used. So sweet means unlucky and prosper means suffer. So these words sweet and prosper are used ironically, which mean unlucky and suffer. Sebastian agrees to Antonio and says, else his pockets would hide his lies. Here the pocket up his report shows the idea of concealing the truth, as we say to pocket an insult. Gonzalo further says that it seems to him that their garments are now as fresh as when they first put them on in Africa, at the marriage of the king's beautiful daughter Claribel to the king of Tunis. Sebastian very ironically remarks that it was a fine marriage and they are doing well on their houseward journey. In reality, he meant that it was an unlucky marriage and they are suffering on their homeward journey. Adrian, Tunis was never graced before with such a paragon to their queen. Paragon, a unique woman. Gonzalo, not since widow Dido's time. Antonio, widow? A pox on that. How came that widow in? Widow Dido? Dido was the queen of Carthage. Now Dido, as I told you, was the queen of Carthage in North Africa. During the travels of Aeneas, he stayed there for some time and the queen fell deeply in love with him. When Aeneas finally left her, she committed suicide. So children, Adrian praises the beauty of Claribel and says that Tunis was never before blessed with such a beauty for a queen. Gonzalo says, not since the days of Dido, who was a widow. Listening to this, Antonio gets agitated and says that it's very unlucky that Gonzalo has mentioned a widow. He asks him why he mentioned the widow named Dido. Let us read the gist of the lines. Gonzalo says that but the really unbelievable thing is, and this is almost incredible. Sebastian says, as most unbelievable things are, which people swear to have seen. Gonzalo further says that their clothes were drenched with seawater, but they came out looking brand new, without any stains of salt. Antonio says to Sebastian to listen to Gonzalo. If his clothes could talk, they would call him a liar. Sebastian says that it may be that it will very falsely hold its tongue. Gonzalo further says that he seriously thinks their clothes are as fresh now as they were the day they put them on in Africa when they attended the marriage of the king's daughter, Claribel, to the king of Tunis. Sebastian sarcastically says that it was a lovely wedding and they are doing really well on their trip to home. So irony has been used here in these lines. Adrian praises Claribel, saying that Tunis has never had such a beautiful queen as Claribel. Gonzalo agrees and says that Tunis had never seen such a beautiful queen since the days of widow Dido. Now Antonio gets very angry on listening to the word widow. He asks why the hell was he calling her widow Dido? Let us now discuss the lines from 76 till 100. Sebastian, what if he had said widower Aeneas? Good Lord, how you take it? Aeneas was Dido's lover. Adrian, widow Dido, said you? You make me study of that. She was of Carthage, not of Tunis. Gonzalo, this Tunis, sir, was Carthage. Adrian, Carthage? Gonzalo, I assure you, Carthage. Now children, this Carthage is the modern city of Tunis, which is located only 10 miles away from the ruins of ancient Carthage. Now Sebastian asks Antonio, what would it matter if he had also mentioned that Aeneas was a widower? He is surprised that Antonio has taken it so seriously. Adrian asks Gonzalo if he mentioned Dido. He says that Gonzalo is making him examine the point that Dido lived in Carthage and not in Tunis. Gonzalo replies that Tunis and Carthage were one. Adrian again asks if it is Carthage. Gonzalo replies that he can assure Adrian that it is Carthage. Antonio, his word is more than the miraculous harp. Harp, children, is a musical instrument. It also has a reference. The old Grecian fable was that the walls of Thebes were not built by hand, but were raised by the magic note of Amphion's harp. Sebastian says that Gonzalo's word has had the same effect, for it has raised the walls and houses of a city in the mind of Adrian. The children Antonio mocks at Gonzalo and says that his word is more powerful than the miraculous harp. Sebastian, he hath raised the wall and houses too. Antonio, what impossible matter will he make easy next? Sebastian, I think he will carry this island home in his pocket and give it his son for an apple. Antonio, and sowing the kernels of it in the sea, bring forth more islands. Kernels means seeds. So Sebastian continues the joke and says that Gonzalo's word has had the same effect, for it has raised the walls and houses of a city in the mind of Adrian. Antonio continues to mock at Gonzalo and asks what impossibility will Gonzalo make to do simple next? Sebastian replies that Gonzalo will carry the island home in his pocket and give it to his son as one might give an apple. Antonio agrees and says that by planting the seeds of the island in the sea, Gonzalo will make other islands grow from them. Gonzalo, I. Antonio, why in good time? Gonzalo to Alonso, sir, we were talking that our garments seem now as fresh as when we were at Tunis at the marriage of your daughter, who is now queen. Antonio, and the rarest that ever came there. Rarest means finest queen. So Gonzalo is listening to what the other two, that is Sebastian and Antonio, are saying, and he asks, what? Antonio again mocks at Gonzalo and says that he has woken up at the right time. Gonzalo then says to Alonso that they were just talking that their garments seemed to be as fresh as they were at Tunis when they were at the marriage of his daughter, who is now the queen of Tunis. Antonio interrupts and says that she is the finest queen that had ever lived. Sebastian, bait, I beseech you, Widow Dido. Antonio, oh, Widow Dido? Aye, Widow Dido. Gonzalo, is not, sir, my doublet as fresh as the first day I wore it? I mean in a sort. Antonio, that sort was well fished for. Let us discuss the meanings, children. Bait means accept. Beseech, request. Doublet is jacket. Sort, in a certain way. So Sebastian again mocks at Gonzalo and says that accept the Widow Dido. Antonio too says that yes, the Widow Dido. Gonzalo doesn't pay attention to them and asks Alonso if he doesn't think that Gonzalo's doublet or his jacket is as new looking as on the first day he wore it. He says that he means in a sense. Antonio says that the qualification in a sort or in a certain way had to be very carefully selected. Let us read the gist of the lines. Sebastian says that the next thing Gonzalo will be talking about widower Ines. Adrian asks if he had talked about Widow Dido, if he really said that. He says that he is not sure about that. Dido was from Carthage, not Tunis. Gonzalo replies that Tunis was Carthage. Adrian asks Gonzalo if it was Carthage. Gonzalo says that he is telling him it was Carthage. Sebastian says that Gonzalo is a miracle worker. If he says Carthage was here, then it was. Antonio asks what miracle he will do next. Sebastian says that he thinks Gonzalo will carry this island home in his pocket and give it to his son like an apple. Antonio says that then Gonzalo would throw the seeds in the sea to make more islands grow. Gonzalo agrees and says, yes, indeed. Antonio mocks at Gonzalo and says, absolutely, yes, indeed. Gonzalo says to Alonso that they were saying that their clothes seemed just as fresh as they did when they attended the wedding of his daughter, who is now the queen of Tunis. Antonio says that Caribel is the most beautiful queen they ever had. Sebastian says that he begs pardon except for the Widow Dido. Antonio asks except for the Widow Dido. Then he says that it's right, except for the Widow Dido. Gonzalo asks Alonso if his jacket isn't just as clean and fresh as the day he put it on. In a way, he means. Antonio says that in a way had to be very carefully selected. The children, that is all for the day today. And for your homework, you will do extract number 2 with pencil on your workbook. Thank you.